It's me, Travis, and I'm a metalhead living in Japan. Now I want to ask you a question. What do you think of when you think of metal? Do you think of this? Do you think of this? Or do you think of this? And when you ask me the question, I always have a different answer in my head. Because when I think of metal, I don't know where to start. I think it's very easy to just pick and choose two different bands from the genre that sound nothing alike. So that's why today I'm gonna bring you this awesome list called 10 bands that make you go, that's metal? Some of you might say they're not metal, but you know what? I think they are. If you're already a metalhead, you probably know these bands. This list is a little bit for the uninitiated, because if you already listen to metal as much as I do, you know it is such a diverse genre. If you are a little unfamiliar, sit back, relax, and here are some bands that I think will surprise you. Let's get into it. First up is a band called Heretoir. Heretoir is a post-metal band from Germany, and they are very influential to their peers within that subgenre. The reason I picked Heretoir is because of the way that their music brings a sense of atmosphere. I think when the average person thinks of metal, they don't think of something subtle. They think of something bold. These are the kind of images we have of metal. You don't typically think of something atmospheric. What are the emotions we associate with metal? Usually it's rage. Rage is something that you put outwards, right? But the emotions here within Heretoir's sound, I think, are more inward. Depression, anxiety, isolation. So, is that something you expected? I hear a lot of people say that they can't get into metal because of the vocals. Well, here's a compromise. There are lots of bands with no vocals. And here's one of them. From Texas, they're called Polyphia. What's the first word that comes to my mind when I hear that? Technical. This is really technical stuff. I think that fans of the old guitar prodigies like Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, if they're a little bit younger today, they would probably be into bands like Animals as Leaders, Covet, Polyphia, all instrumental, all very technical. There's an extremely high level of precision within all the instruments that play here. If you like what you heard, there's actually a lot of really technical instrumental bands out there today. There's so many. But I think what makes Polyphia unique is that something about their sound, it comes off like it gives you a little bit of like a hip hop vibe. Somehow they integrated, like it sounds like a beat almost, right? I don't know how they pull it off, but it's amazing. Now, a lot of these bands would be called math rock. Is math rock metal? I don't know. It depends on the band, right? I think a lot of them can fit into math rock or prog metal, but I think Polyphia has some heavy enough tendencies to count. Let's move on. Up next is a metal legend named Devin Townsend. Devin Townsend is prolific within metal. I found out about him when he was in a goofy band called Strapping Young Lad, and since then, I think he's become a lot more known for his solo stuff, and rightfully so. He's released so many projects that some of them are by Devin Townsend, the Devin Townsend Band, and some are by the Devin Townsend Project. Jesus, he was even Steve Vai's singer at one point. He's produced so many bands. If you listen to metal, you probably listen to at least one band that he's produced before. He is weird. His music is bonkers. It's all over the place. It takes you to places that you never expect to go. I mean, really, I would liken him to a modern Frank Zappa. If Frank Zappa was in metal, he would be something like Devin Townsend probably. We're talking about a guy who made 2 concept albums about a puppet alien that comes to Earth demanding the world's greatest cup of coffee. It's like an episode of Adventure Time or something. I highly suggest checking out Devin Townsend. You might like it, you might hate it, but it will be an experience. Up next is a folk metal band from Switzerland called Eluveitie. That's right, I said folk metal. Wait, folk metal? Like, you'd say folk, you'd say metal, you put them together? Exactly, and you know what? The result is awesome. It's awesome if you're a nerd, which I am. Folk metal bands, they're a dime a dozen in Europe. They're all over the place, okay? And you can find them in places like Switzerland, Norway, Holland, and they just have such a cool sound. When you listen to a band like Eluveitie, you listen to a band like Ensiferum, Fintroll, okay? It just makes you want to like put on a helmet, grab a sword, and go slay a dragon. Or just LARP around in the woods like a loser. I mean, like a really cool person. If you find that to be interesting, guess what? You're in luck, because I've got a couple more folk metal bands to talk to you about, but ones that sound a little bit different than that. Let's talk about a band called Tengger Cavalry. RIP to my dude Nature G, who started Tengger Cavalry in Mongolia. This is a folk metal band, but it's a lot different than the one we just listened to before. It's different than Eluveitie, right? That's because folk music in Europe is different instruments. That's something that's really awesome about folk metal. Every country has a different folk tradition. What can you find unique within Tengger Cavalry? There's Mongolian throat singing, and there's other Asian instruments as well. I wanted to include this band because it's so unique. There's another Mongolian folk metal band called The Who, which a lot of people I think already know about. Asia is a place that gets left out of the conversation quite often when we talk about metal. So listen to Tengger Cavalry. There are a lot of other cool Asian bands you can check out too.
Little one gotta heed my warning. Devil is kind. He coming early morning.
Up next, let's talk about Zeal and Ardor. Singer Manuel made a post on 4chan saying, name some genres and I will mix two of them. Someone said black metal. Someone trollingly and disgustingly said N-word music. But instead of letting it get to him, what he did was he took black metal as a template and then he applied old slave chant melodies from the Deep South. These are songs with a lot of pain and rebellion. I think what we're seeing here is an emergence of North American folk metal. It's a little bit more minimalist than European folk metal. It's more atmospheric. And I think atmosphere is a word you're going to hear a lot in this list. Think about it. The people creating that kind of folk music, they didn't have access to instruments like flute pens or mandolins or whatever. It's a lot more just singing with your voice, chanting, stomping, clapping, harmonicas, acoustic guitars. It's very interesting stuff. It's fascinating. Zeal and Ardor's influences do not stop there. It also includes what we think of when we think of traditional blues. It also includes gospel, and the influences go on and on. Coupling that with black metal, it's super fascinating stuff, and I really recommend it. Next up on our list of bands that make you go, huh, that's metal, is a little band called the Deftones.
So ride! Right back to school! Chase!
I know what some of you are thinking. Deftones is like a pretty famous band. And you'd be right, they are pretty famous. But I always found it a little hard to reconcile them as a metal band. Why would they have such a contentious sound? Listen to this. How is that metal? Oh wait, that's right, they do this too. Okay, so you can get the best of both worlds with Deftones. Beauty and the Beast, good cop, bad cop, and they're good at doing it at the same time. It's not always just toggling between one sound and the other. Something interesting about Deftones, atmosphere. There's something moody about Deftones. And when I lived in America, I just remember Deftones was one of those bands I would always put on in the car and vibe to, you know? It's just, it's got a mood to it. I think a big part of it is Chino Moreno's vocals. There's something haunting and soothing at the same time. Nobody sounds like him. That's a pretty unique thing to accomplish. Talk about a band called Epica. Epica are one of the progenitors of a subgenre called symphonic metal. This is metal that incorporates elements of symphony orchestra. You thought the nerd stuff was over? Oh no. We've got more dragon slaying music for you. And here it is. If you like this kind of thing, well guess what? You're lucky, because again, there's lots of bands that sound like this. There's a never-ending list of bands that sound like this. It's very prevalent in Europe, and they all have operatic female singers. It's pretty cool. You know, when you think of metal, you don't think of opera. Now, some of you might be saying, why didn't I choose Nightwish instead of Epica? I guess Nightwish is a little more obvious. I think Epica's a little bit heavier, more of a balance between the heavy, the accessible. They've got it all in one pot. I thought it might be a more interesting choice for this list in particular. Now let's listen to Church of the Cosmic Skull. Hey, how'd this get in metal? It just sounds like 70s hard rock. Well, you know, that's what metal used to sound like. If I name some hard rock bands from the 70s, Blue Oyster Cult, Kansas, Iron Butterfly, Lucifer's Friend, I would say there's not that hard of a line between these bands and Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. Even if we think about the most famous hard rock bands from that era, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, it's like, who gets them, you know? Those are definitely hard rock bands, but if you call them metal, I don't think anyone would be upset. This is a band that I think, if they were around at the time, they could have played with either set of bands. They could have played with the hard rock bands, they could have played with the more specifically metal bands. It's real interesting stuff. So what's the debate here? Remember that question at the beginning of the video? What do you think of when you think of metal? I think a lot of people forgot about this. This band is psychedelic as balls, and there are tons of bands bringing back that 70s sound, and it is a warm and fuzzy feeling to hear it so often. I think a lot of that stuff is worth checking out. Last on our list is a band called Author and Punisher. I saved this band for last because I truly believe it is the weirdest one we're going to talk about. A lot of metal has a sonic quality of it that resembles machinery. The constant chugging of a band like Meshuggah, the electronic element of industrial bands. This band sounds like literally a bunch of machines, because that's what it is. It's a bunch of machines. There are no guitars, there are no drums. It does have screaming. It's just one guy in the band, and he just makes all this random stuff and makes music out of it. It's pretty weird. This is not a band, it's a one-man project, and it's definitely a passion project. Just look at what we're dealing with. Now, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, I don't like it. It's not for me, but obviously there's someone out there that would, and that's why I want to put it out there, because the fact that it exists is super interesting. I don't think that this is an anecdote that you can just brush over in the evolution of this genre. The fact that something like this exists in metal, I think speaks to the innovation and the creativity that you can find in the genre. Now, before we go, I just want to close out with some honorable mentions. Check out these bands if you get a chance. All right, thank you for listening to my list. You guys are awesome. If you can, subscribe to some of my social media. Subscribe to some of Small World's social media. I hope you had a fun time being surprised with some weird bands, and I'll see you around. Bang, bang.